We're about to dive into one of the most famous and frankly weirdest stories ever told. A man literally wrestling with God all night long. But what if I told you that hidden inside the original Hebrew, this bizarre encounter is actually the blueprint for how an entire nation was born?
This right here, this is the cry of a man who has absolutely nothing left to lose. It's not a polite request, it's a desperate demand. He is cornered, he is terrified, and he knows that this mysterious figure is his only way out. So to really get how he got to this point, we've got to understand the man himself. So, let's meet Jacob. And let's be real, for most of his life, he's not exactly the hero of the story. His entire existence has been one big scheme, one calculation after another. And now, after 20 years on the run, he has to face the brother he totally cheated, Esau, who, get this, is coming to meet him with 400 men. Jacob is terrified, and so he does the only thing he knows how to do. He comes up with a plan. To really get Jacob, you have to start with his name. In Hebrew, Yaakov literally means heel grabber. Yeah, it comes from the story of his birth, where he was literally grabbing his twin brother's heel. But the name also means supplanter, trickster. His name is his personality. He's the guy who gets ahead by tripping people up and taking what's theirs. So the ultimate heel grabber makes his final, most calculated move. And it's a pretty smart strategy, you gotta admit. First, he sends wave after wave of expensive gifts to try and soften Esau up. Then he splits everything he has, his family, his wealth, all of it, into two separate camps. It's just simple risk management, right? If Esau attacks and wipes out one camp, hey, maybe the other one gets away. It's the ultimate human attempt to control a God-sized problem. So after he sets his whole plan in motion, after he sends every last person and every last thing he owns across the river, Jacob is left completely and utterly alone in the dark. He's at a river with a very, very specific name, and this is the spot where his entire carefully built world is about to get completely demolished. Jacob's big strategy was called Mahanaim, which means two camps. But now, the text makes a point to tell us he is levado, left alone. See what happened? He went from two camps down to one man. All his plans, all his money, all the people he was hiding behind, gone. He is totally and very intentionally exposed. And this is where the genius of the original text just blows me away. The name of the river he's at is Yabok. The Hebrew word for wrestling is avak. You hear that? Yabok, avak. It's a pun. The text itself is winking at us, basically saying, hey, this place was destined for this fight. The very ground is named for the spiritual brawl that's about to go down. But wait, it goes even deeper. If you look at a more mystical reading of the Hebrew letters themselves, Yabok isn't just a river, it's a process. The letters suggest that God's hand, that's the Yod, is purposefully bringing Jacob into a confined space, like a house or a room, that's the Bet, for one reason, to set him apart, to make him holy, that's the Kaf. So this isn't some random fight by a river, it's a divine appointment in a specially prepared arena. So the fight goes on all night long, and the text says his opponent sees that he can't prevail, so he reaches out and touches Jacob's hip. But I'm telling you, this touch is one of the most misunderstood parts of the entire story. It was anything but a gentle tap. The Hebrew word used here is taka. And while our Bibles often say touched, the root of that word implies something way more forceful, way more deliberate. It's an impact, a strike. This wasn't some cheap shot in a fight. It was a calculated move with a very deep meaning. Elsewhere in the Bible, this same word, taka, is used for things like driving a tent peg into the ground, hammering a nail into a wall, or the powerful blast of a shofar horn. Now, what do all those things have in common? They are acts that fix something in place, that make a permanent mark, that announce a covenant. This wasn't just an injury, it was a branding. And think about where God strikes him, the hip socket, the very source of his physical power to stand up, to run away, to be self-reliant. God disables Jacob's ability to stand on his own 2 feet. He physically breaks the part of him that let the heel grabber always run his own schemes. You see, he had to be broken before he could truly be blessed. And right there, in that moment of being totally broken, hip out of its socket, Jacob does the absolute unthinkable. He doesn't quit. No, he clings on even tighter. And as the dawn starts to break, he makes that famous, desperate demand.
Okay, this brings us to the absolute core, the theological heart of this whole story, and it's all hidden in a single Hebrew root, B-R-K. From this one tiny root, you get two massively important words, barakah, which means blessing, and berek, which means knee. In Hebrew, linguistically and spiritually, you just can't separate the two. Just think about what this means for a second. It's staggering. Jacob wanted the blessing, but he wanted to win it standing up, on his own terms, as the victor. God had to literally break his hip, forcing him into a posture of leaning, of bowing, of bending the knee, before he could give him the true blessing he was so desperate for. The story is screaming at us, you cannot receive a divine blessing while you're still standing on your own 2 feet. So the struggle is finally over. The sun's about to come up. A broken, exhausted Jacob has held on and gotten his blessing. But the encounter's not quite done. Now comes the most important part of all, the transformation.
The divine being asks him this simple but just devastating question. He doesn't ask, "Who are you?" He asks, "What is your name?" He is forcing Jacob to say out loud the very essence of his identity, that label that has defined his entire life of cheating and scheming.
And for the first time in his life, maybe, Jacob doesn't try to make a deal. He doesn't try to trick his way out. He just confesses, I am Yaakov. He owns it. I am the heel graver. I am the supplanter. He has to admit who he was before he can become who he's meant to be. And it's only in response to that raw confession that he's given a new name. You will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. And what does it mean? For you have struggled with God and with humanity, and you have prevailed. But hold on a second. How does that make any sense? How can a man whose hip was just popped out of its socket with a single touch be told that he prevailed against God? And here is the beautiful, incredible paradox. His victory wasn't in winning the fight. His victory was in losing it all. It was in being broken and then just refusing to let go. He prevailed not by overpowering God, but by clinging to him in absolute, desperate dependence. What did he win? He won a limp and a new name. Jacob then names the place Peniel, which means face of God, and he tells us why. Because I have seen the face of God and my life was spared. He went into that night absolutely terrified of seeing his brother Esau's face, and he came out having seen God's face instead. The greater encounter completely solved the lesser fear. And so, as the sun rises, it shines on a new man, Israel, who now walks with a permanent limp. This is literally the birth of a nation. It wasn't founded by some conquering hero on a white horse. It was founded by a broken man, whose limp is a constant, physical reminder that true strength isn't in standing on your own, but in leaning on God. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Jacob's wound gave him a new walk. His struggle gave him a brand new name. And it just forces us to ask, what happens in our own lives when the source of our greatest pain, our deepest struggle, becomes the very thing that redefines who we are?